Welcome. This is a quick how to play of A Hex Too Far. I'm the designer of the game, Douglas Triggs, and we're going to walk through the beginning of a game to get you started. We start off on the main page here and start by selecting the Create New Game button here. This page shows all the scenarios which can be sorted and filtered with the selection boxes at the top here. To select a scenario, just click on its entry and we'll start with scenario 001, give it a name, and for demonstration purposes, select a solo game so we can play both sides. Obviously, if you select Allied or Axis, you'll play that side, but you'll need to wait for an opponent to join your game. So let's start. And the game starts. First off, you'll see a map on the bottom and two windows above it, the chat window to the top right and the action window to the top left. The chat is limited to the players in the game, in this case just me. No one else can leave messages there. However, anyone else viewing the game can see it, so if you need more privacy, I suggest using other tools to communicate with your opponent, such as Discord or something. On the top left, the action window here shows all the actions that occur, as well as the die roll results and the effects of those actions. Below those is a control bar that has actions a player can take, although currently it only contains the documentation and resignation buttons, which obviously we're not going to use right now. But as the game continues, different options will appear. The bar can be moved to the side to make more vertical space, but it's harder to understand what the buttons do when you only have the symbols for the actions and the tooltips. So we're just going to go ahead and leave it on top here. The control bar also tells you which player you're playing, which is important for solo games, or if you're playing a long async game and forgotten who you are. The map itself can be dragged around either by clicking and dragging on the map or by using the mini-map here on the top left. On top, to the right are the map display controls, the most important of which are the map scale controls. The first one controls the size of the map itself, and the interface can also be resized with the second button. Let's go ahead and rescale the interface so we can see more of the map at once. Additionally, the windows above the map can be collapsed to make more space, which we won't do in this game so we can see the action results more easily. And the header can be hidden, which we will do since we don't need to navigate back right now. Surrounding the map are the unit panel buttons, which show reinforcements and eliminated units here. The panel themselves can be dragged around if you need to see different parts of the map or to get closer to where you want to deploy. And the turn track here, the weather display is here, which we won't go into on this game since it's dry and calm and the weather isn't variable, so it won't have any effect on the play in this particular scenario. The score display is here, which also shows the directions the players are advancing. And by implication, the way the units retreat, that is the opposite direction. And down here we have the initiative track, which we'll talk about more later. So let's deploy some units. Units are deployed by selecting them in the panel, then clicking on the map, so let's do that. While we're at it, note the squads can be split while they're still in the panel, so let's split one unit and then deploy those. There are a couple of reasons we might want to split squads. We might want units to fit under the stacking limit that are carrying or crewing weapons, or we might want to have minimal forces to cover parts of the map. Teams can also be recombined later during play. Now, here's something important. Support weapons like this machine gun here must be placed on a unit that you want to carry it, and the map will show available units that can carry the support weapons, or more precisely, will color hexes where they can't be carried in red. Finally, these are leaders. They give bonuses to morale checks, firepower, and movement to units they're stacked with, and also allow the player to make fire groups. But before we place them, let's look at some other things we can do. First, we haven't covered the bottom of the map at all, and maybe we're worried about our opponent flanking us, so let's move a couple units down there. We can undo all of the placement and replace the units there, but instead let's undeploy a couple units. To do that, we need to unselect any units we're deploying, since clicking on the map will place units instead of allowing us to select units. We can do that either by clicking on the selected units or closing the reinforcement panel. Note that now we can expand and select units on the map, so let's select a unit. Now at this point, we can undeploy the unit either in the control bar up here or by using the control below the unit here. Let's do that. Notice that now that we've selected unit, some of the hexes are grayed out. That's because if we deployed there, they'd exceed the stacking limit. Full squads have a size of 6, which is displayed in the upper right of the counter, but the stacking limit is 12, and there are a 10 size points of units in those hexes. But we wanted to put them at the bottom of the map anyway. Let's do that. And then move one other unit. And then place the leaders. Now, before we place the other side's units, let's take a closer look at a couple things. First off, let's look at the line of sight. If we select the overlay button here, it toggles between expanding the unit overlays and the line of sight overlay. The way that works is if you mouse over units, it will show which hexes they can see and the hindrance of those hexes like so. Note that in this game, unlike other squad level tactical games, line of sight is all or nothing based on entire hexes, not on what the line drawn from the middle of one hex to another intersects inside the hex. So if any of the hex intersects that line and the terrain blocks line of sight is blocked. Next up, we'll look at the terrain help, which can be toggled on and off like so, which when mousing over the map shows terrain effect details like movement, cost, cover, or hindrance. Next, there's help for the counters, which is located where the question mark in the upper right of each counter is. This can also be clicked on to go directly to the counter documentation, which has general information as well as an interactive counter legend, which can be used at the meanings of the numbers or symbols on each type of counter, as well as broken counters. Anyway, let's get back to the game and deploy the Russians. We'll go ahead and skip ahead here. All right, game started. Let's just play for a bit to get a feel for things. At its most basic, you just select units and decide what to do with them, which you can do in multiple ways. Once a unit is selected, you can either use the buttons up top in the control bar, or many of the actions can be chosen from buttons attached to the counters here, or you can right-click and pull up a menu of options. Also note that the numbers in the buttons up top, those are initiative costs, which is how much of the marker over here on the initiative track will move towards the opponent's side each time an action is taken. So let's choose a counter to move. This is a victory hex. When calculating a score, victory hexes are worth 10 points each. The rest of your score is calculated by adding up the total size of enemy units eliminated, with the exception of leaders that are worth 6 points, and support weapons or crude weapons, which are not worth anything since they can't be directly targeted. They will only break when firing and can be picked up by anyone if dropped. So let's go ahead and capture the victory hex and then move back into cover. After that, once we've spent the initiative to move the initiative marker, we have to check our initiative. The way initiative works is that the marker moves into the opponent's side. We have to roll the die to see if we keep it. And if we fail the check, which has to match the number under the marker, initiative goes to the other player and they get to move. Over the course of the game, initiative will go back and forth until both players pass back to back, and then the turn is over. And the Soviets fail their initiative check, and initiative goes to the Germans. But before the Germans move, they get the chance to do reaction fire. Reaction fire is available anytime your opponent fires or moves. One of the special things about reaction fire, in addition to the bonus it gives to hit, is that if your opponent moves, that you can target any hex that they move through if it's in range and line of sight. So let's select a unit and do that. And we hit. And the opponent then has to make a morale check, and they fail the check and the infantry breaks. And because they are moving, their move is now cut short. So, 2 things to know about broken units. The first is if they're hit and fail morale check again, they're eliminated. The other is they can now be routed. There are 2 ways to route a unit. Either the owner can route it, say to get it out of a sticky situation, or their opponent can attempt to route all of the opponent's units. Let's do that. And the unit failed the route check and has to retreat towards the Soviet player side of the map. Once the unit is routed, it can't be routed again in the same turn. Additionally, a player cannot attempt to route their opponent's units in back-to-back actions. They must do something else before routing again, passing included. Routes also use initiative and also require initiative checks afterwards. Let's go ahead and pass the German player. So let's do a group move. The way we do that is we select an infantry unit, then we start the move, at which point we can select all the units we want to move together. Let's move these units here. Again, an initiative check. This time it's an automatic pass since the marker hasn't moved to the German side yet. And reaction fire again. This time we'll use a special ability of leaders, making fire groups. To do that, we select a unit, start a fire action, then select the leader, and then all the units we want to fire together. Once we've selected the target, we can see all the details of the current fire action, including odds. Let's finish, and we get another hit. When that happens, all the Soviet units in the hex here have to take morale checks, and the Soviets are unlucky today, and 2 units break. So let's talk about another kind of move, assault moves. Assault moves are special since they don't trigger reaction fire, and they're the only way to enter an opponent's hex. The downsides are that they can't have taken any other actions, which we'll talk about in a moment, and exhaust the moving unit, which we'll also talk about in a moment, and they can only be for 1 hex. If the units are still in the same hex at the end of a turn, close combat will occur. It's possible, though, for a unit to leave the hex with an assault movement of its own, or if they route their own unit if it's broken. Like firing, mousing over units in the hex will show the close combat information and odds. Finally, let's talk about one more thing. Units that have already moved or fired can take an additional move, either intensively firing or rushing. Both actions are taken at a penalty in terms of to hit or in terms of movement, and will exhaust the unit so that it's tired next turn and will then have penalties, but sometimes may be worth it if it's the last move, or they have a shot they won't have next turn, or they need to rush out of the open or into a victory hex. And that's it for now. That should be enough to get you started. Enjoy the game and thanks for watching.